Welcome in to the Lady Vol Basketball Fever podcast, part of Vol Basketball Fever. We're a show dedicated exclusively to talking about the Lady Vols and news around the program. Tune in to hear thoughts and discussions from experts who cover the Lady Vols on a daily basis. Now, here's a new episode of the Lady Vol Basketball Fever podcast. Hello everyone, and welcome in to another episode of the Lady Vol Basketball Fever podcast. I am Nathanael Rutherford here with Vol Basketball Fever, joined by Cora Hall of Knox News. Very, very glad to have you back on the podcast and the show here, Cora. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I know it's been a while, but you know how February is.
Oh yeah, February, March. You've been particularly busy because you don't just cover Lady Vols, you cover women's athletics at large for Tennessee for Knox News. So you've had a busy time the last month. So I totally understand. I'm very happy to have you on here. Very appreciative of you taking time to hop on the show to talk Lady Vols basketball with me. And again, all of you who are maybe new here or haven't seen Cora in a while, go check her out. She does all kinds of great stuff for Knox News. I'll put a link to her Twitter on the description and YouTube and on the podcast description notes as well. Check her out. She has a lot of great stories. We were talking before we hit record here about a lot of different stuff she's been doing for the NCAA Women's Tournament, for just different stories for Knox News and stuff. So I'll let her plug all that in this show as well. But again, thank you all so much for tuning in. Please subscribe to the channel while you're here and like this video. If you're on YouTube, if you're listening to this on podcast, thank you so much for that as well. Leave a 5-star review. I'll read it off on a podcast in the future if you do. And subscribe while you're here. So all that good stuff, let's get out of the way. Cora, let's go ahead and dive in to the Lady Vols being a 4 seed in the West region, or excuse me, in the Wichita region of the bracket. Before we kind of dive into some specifics, I want to get your thoughts because I was, on Selection Sunday, I was waiting and kept waiting. I was like, okay, where are the Lady Vols going to go? I guess they're going to fall here into the Wichita region. I was expecting them to be a 3 seed. Was I off on that? I feel like, to me, it felt like a lot of the talk that was the Lady Vols were kind of penciled in as a 3, and then when I saw them pop up as a 4, I thought, that's interesting. Like I thought they were going to be a 3. I think I tweeted out something about them not getting respect, but at the same time, like, I kind of get it. You're without Jordan Horston. You've had injuries. You've kind of not done as well here down the stretch as you had at the beginning of the year. So I kind of get their stock falling. I was just kind of surprised to see them off that 3 line, because I think the last bracketology I had seen before that, before the Selection Sunday, was Charlie Cream had him as a 3 seed.
Yeah, so I actually went to Charlie Cream and Joe Lenardi actually had like a media Zoom for some media members to come and ask questions about bracketology and stuff. And so I'd asked about Tennessee, and because Charlie had mentioned he could see Indiana jumping to a 3 seed earlier in the conversation. And so I was like, who do you see them replacing? Do you feel like Tennessee is solid at a 3? Because that's where he had them. So I was curious to know who was going to drop. And he said that, he could see Tennessee dropping because they have a really strong resume there. It's stronger than some of the other 3 seeds, but it was all with Jordan Horston. So I don't really think anyone expected her to be back right now, but like in the case that she had been, it confirmed like, I'll be back in a week, that might've changed things, but you can't predict that. And so the fact that the resume was really strong because of her, I think hurt them. And I think if they had maybe been a little more consistent in February with her, because even before they lost her, they were a little inconsistent. They were dropping some upsets on the road. I think that started to hurt them already. So I think if they had been a little more consistent and gotten some more road wins in February, that would have helped. But yeah, it's hard to kind of, it's a hard situation because it's like, she does so much for them. And if she comes back, she will completely change the trajectory of that team, but you have no idea if she's going to come back or not.
Yeah, that was my follow-up question to you, Cora, was going to be, we saw the video, the little teaser video, I think that Coach Sam Williams put out of her shooting and, putting pressure on her on both legs and everything. But I assume, Kelly Harper hasn't said anything, that there hasn't been any sort of indication from anybody at Tennessee that she's, any sort of progress and it isn't going to come back anytime soon.
So my impressions from the times that we've asked Kelly about Jordan, up until Sunday, it had been just like kind of like a, why are we still asking this type thing? Because it's like there's no update. She's still pretty much week to week was what we were heard before the SEC tournament, which is understandable because it's kind of a brutal injury. So, you can't really, checking it every day didn't really make sense. So it was a week to week thing. It was like if people would ask if she was coming back, she'd be like, I mean, yeah, it's possible, but like, don't get your hopes up type thing. Like, we're basically just not going to rule it out because you never know, but like not super hopeful. And then Sunday, she had said she's progressing and, there's a possibility that she comes back, and like, depending on how far they go, it's not out of the question that she returns. And she's pretty much day to day. And so that was, kind of a distinct change in like her language of it, combined with the shooting, video. So I think it's possible at this point, but you really can't guarantee it. I would say I don't see her coming back opening weekend, just based on what I know. I don't really know, the details of her progress, but I would say if they make it out of the second round, maybe she would come back. She'd make it back for the next weekend, but who's to say? I feel like we won't know till she's warming up on the court and we're like, oh, okay, so she might play some minutes tonight, might not. But I have a feeling that it has to be really sound and like it can't be re-injured easily from contact because she has such a big future ahead of her that there's no point in wasting that.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think that was something that Kelly said, like the day, the game after she was injured and everything. They said they don't want to. They're not rushing her back. She's only going to come back if she's 100% healthy and able to actually play. And like you said, not re-injure it, especially on contact. So you're right. It'd be nice to get her back for if the Lady Vols get to the Sweet 16, for example, and she's able to play. Because if you're there, you're likely playing Louisville if you get to the Sweet 16. So that'd be nice to have Jordan Horston back. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I am looking at the bracket in front of me right here in the Wichita region. Lady Vols has said 4 seed there, playing Buffalo. They're in the same bracket or same region as the 1 seed Louisville, 2 seed Baylor, and 3 seed Michigan, which they made a point on Sunday on ESPN talking about. It came down to who's going to be that final 1 seed. Is it going to be Louisville? Is it going to be Baylor? So let's put Louisville at 1 and then stick Baylor at 2, both in the same region there, Wichita. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, looking at kind of potential matchups and stuff, Lady Vols got to get by a 13 seed Buffalo team that has a really, really, really talented scorer. I was looking at the roster and stuff, kind of doing on the fly breakdown on Sunday when I did a live stream here on Vol Basketball Fever's YouTube channel, and noticed that Buffalo has Daisha Fair, who is a really good scorer, averaged 23.4 points per game this season, made almost 37% of her threes, and she shot a lot of threes. She attempted 240 so far this season, averaging almost 38 minutes a game. She's only 5'5", but she actually is averaging almost 5 rebounds a game, which is pretty phenomenal for her not being super tall. And she had a pretty good assist to turnover ratio. I think looking at right now, 142 assists to 65 turnovers, so that's over a 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio, which is great for a point guard, and 69 steals on the year, so over 2 steals per game as well. But she is a legit, really, really good scorer, really, really good player. They have Summer Hempel, Hempel, I do not know how to say her last name, my apologies, who averages a double-double on the year, 13 points, 10 boards. So I know, Cora, you've obviously probably taken a much deeper look even than I have for this team. So what about this Buffalo team? What can you tell Lady Vol fans about the Buffalo team that they may not know already? Because I look at them as not a chalk it up as a definite W for Lady Vols, because they look like a somewhat dangerous 14 seed here in this bracket, or excuse me, 13 seed in this bracket here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first point about mid-major teams, and now in the women's tournament especially, is they're not easy wins. Mm-hmm. I mean, Alexus Dye on Troy last year almost upset Texas A&M as a number 2 seed, and they probably should have. So they have Florida Gulf Coast as a 12 seed, which is frankly ridiculous to me because they're ranked in the coaches and AP poll. So yeah, I'm not really sure how they fell so far. Princeton's an 11, they could be higher. There's so many Power 5 teams that are good. They just fall to a double-digit seed because they're not Power 5. So Buffalo, talented team. The MAC is a pretty decent mid-major conference. And Fair is a killer on offense. She's gonna be hard to stop. She still scored 22 points when they played South Carolina. So, she can obviously get around the height. She can, I think her and Georgia Woolley can shoot from behind the arc. So that's a distinct concern for the Lady Vols, who struggled against Kentucky. That first quarter, they were just hitting threes in rhythm, and it was just dagger after dagger. And that was the difference. If they'd been able to slow that down, that could have been their game. Absolutely. Because they kept pace offensively. They just couldn't stop them. Kentucky's so hot right now. And so I think that's just should be a main point of emphasis for them is, shutting down the perimeter and then just making sure you don't make it easy for these guards to get in the paint because, they are young, they are a little bit shorter. So they should be able to keep them out of the paint is my point. So it's going to have to start with defense. And I think that's how they play best anyways. Start with the defense, let the offense follow because they can clearly produce on offense. They scored 74 points in both their SEC games in the tournament. So, just tighten it up on defense. And but I mean, Buffalo isn't someone to overlook, especially when you're hosting, especially when you're trying to break this streak of second round exits. You can't overlook that first matchup.
Yeah, that's another question I had for you is how big of a difference is it, for Tennessee being able to host? Because I think that's huge. Like I think being able to still be a top 16 seed and be able to host, I think could make a world of difference here in this, to get over potentially that second round hump. We'll talk a little bit here in a second about, the potential second round opponent, either Oregon or Belmont. But I think with the way the Lady Vols played this year at Thompson-Boling, look at some of the games they had this year. I mean, they beat Texas at home. They had some really high profile wins at home, or really just high profile just crowds at home. I was there for the last regular season game against LSU, and that was a really good crowd. Obviously, Lady Vols weren't able to win that one, but they were also, without Jordan Horston, they trailed, they fed on quite a bit early in that game by double digits and still roared back in the fourth quarter and really about stole that win away from LSU. So I think, you were talking about, getting over that hump. They haven't been to the Sweet 16 in over half a decade. Like that would be, I've said on this show before, that would be progress. Maria and I talked about it. Maria Cornelius and I talked about it a couple times about, that would be a legitimate, point to it, proof of progress for this program to get back at least to the Sweet 16. And I think this is a pretty decent chance of doing it because, like you said, I think they can handle Buffalo if they play the defense that they're known for. And then I look ahead to either Oregon or Belmont. Oregon's a really good team, a 5 seed, 2011 this year. Belmont's also, again, you're talking about mid-majors in the women's game, and be improving year by year. And that, this year especially, it seems like there's some pretty dangerous mid-majors. Belmont's not a team you want to, they're a pretty dangerous 12 seed as well. They're a team that's 22-7. Their opponents only scored 55 points per game against them this year. That's pretty good defense for Belmont. So, but regardless, looking at whether it's Oregon or Belmont, if the Lady Vols do advance past Buffalo, I think being in Thompson-Boling is a definite difference maker for this team. And I think that coupled with the fact that this is, a pretty solid team in Tennessee, that I think that could help them get over that hump finally, and like you said, break that second round curse, hopefully, for this team and this program.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts off that. First, Thompson-Boling, obviously they play great in Thompson-Boling. And I think when it comes to playing, like a mid-major team in the first round, having a home court advantage like Thompson-Boling, where there will be thousands and thousands of people in it, it can be intimidating. And I'm not saying that it's going to intimidate the Buffalo or Belmont, but it's like when you can't simulate that feeling when there's 10,000 people cheering for the other team, or, and that might inspire some teams, but it also can, be kind of like deer in the headlights type situation and be a kind of an advantage at times for Tennessee. So that's great for them. And, I think even with the injuries, I think falling from projected number one to not even hosting would have kind of been a really big confidence shattering type thing for them, because they were still playing well in the SEC tournament and they closed the SEC play pretty strong. So if they were to fall out of the top 16, I think that would have really kind of hurt the morale on the team a little bit. I mean, at least for me, it would have. And then when it comes to the sub-region, I think Oregon and Tennessee are kind of similar in ways. I heard some other people say this, but I definitely agree and kind of was thinking the same thing. Like Oregon and Tennessee have both showed they can be really good teams, right? Like they've had really good games. They have showed that if they do the right things, they execute, they can be one of the best teams in the country. But if they don't, we've seen some pretty bad games. So it kind of depends on who's showing up this weekend. It really does. So, because if Tennessee can play full team effort together, play defense, they can win these games. But it's 40 minutes of that. It's not, you can't take off one quarter. It cannot happen. Otherwise, you will go home. So I think with Oregon, it's kind of the same way. Like they've had some really good games, but then they've split with like multiple teams in the Pac-12. Like they split with Arizona State. They split with a couple other ones that they probably should have just beaten them both times. So there's a little bit of inconsistency there. And so I think that'll be interesting if they meet up in the second round. I think Tennessee can and should win that game. But I think Wichita's gonna be an interesting region because I think Louisville's super overrated as a 1 seed. Not super, but I think that they shouldn't have stayed at the 1 seed. I think that Baylor should have been the 1 seed. They made it to the Big 12 championship and only lost to Texas, who is on fire right now. And Louisville lost in the first round of the ACC tournament, like in a way that we've seen them do it multiple times this year. So I don't really know if that's deserving of a 1 seed. I think Baylor should have been the 1 seed. And so you have basically 2 1 seeds in this region. You have 3 top 4 draft picks in this region in Shakira Austin, Alyssa Smith, and Naz Hillman. So there's a lot of talent. I think Nebraska's a sleeper team. I actually picked Nebraska to upset Louisville. So we'll see. And my reasoning behind that is Louisville's fourth quarter breakdowns. And Nebraska is a very good offensive team that will exploit that. So we'll see what happens. But those are kind of my thoughts on the Wichita region.
I like that a lot, and I have a lot of things I wanted that I kind of want to say, and I'm trying to figure out the order of which I want to say them. I'm going to get to the Louisville one in a second because I genuinely agree with you. I think Louisville is easily the weakest 1 seed. That that's why they're in Wichita. That's why they are where they are in the bracket. But I'll get to that in a second. I'm going to look at the Oregon and Belmont game because I thought you raised some good points there about kind of Oregon being, inconsistent. Because I was looking at their schedule, looking at kind of the matchup breakdown thing I'm looking at on ESPN here for the women's tournament challenge that they have along with the men's side. And you're right. Like they beat UConn earlier by 13. They beat Oklahoma. They absolutely destroyed Washington State. But then, again, to your point, they lost twice to Stanford. They lost to South Carolina, which I forgot they played South Carolina, but they lost to them. And they lost to South Florida. And again, they split several other Pac-12 games they played this year as well. So, assuming Tennessee gets by Buffalo, which I think they will win. I think that, again, having Thompson Bowling really helps. Who do you feel has the advantage in the Oregon Belmont game? Who do you think Tennessee ends up playing in that second round, as long as, assuming Tennessee makes it to the second round, I guess?
Yeah, I think I wish I knew more about Belmont. I wish I had seen a couple of their games this year because at least in the men's side, the 5-12 upset is always a thing. But I just don't know if that, that was almost like I feel like people just expected it at a certain point. But, Oregon is an upsettable team, in my opinion, but I just don't think I know enough about Belmont to really pick that. And I think, I don't know, just with the personnel that Oregon has, I see them getting out of the first round. Like it would take a lot for them to lose in the first round, to me. And I think, the other thing with Tennessee and Buffalo is the fact that, Buffalo is leading their 2 guards are freshman, sophomore. So Tennessee has some experience, even though, Kelly made the point that, 2020 was canceled. So not a lot of players have NCAA experience, but, there's something to be said about having senior Ray Brawl in the starting lineup, graduate students, Alexus Dye and Jordan Walker in the lineup, and junior Tamari Key. So, it's like there's still experience in a lot more than a freshman,
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. No, and you're right. Like I was trying to find information, and sorry if that had audio bleed through on a site I was trying to find for, I think, NCAA.com. Decided to have autoplay a video, and I was like, okay. I was trying to find records of like I've seen the seeding matchup records for the men's side, and I was trying to find it for the women's, and I found like overall records in the tournament of like 5 seeds and 12 seeds, but that wasn't what I was looking for. I was looking for like the specific breakdown. I couldn't find it there when I was looking for it. So you're right though. Like I think from what little I know about both the teams, I haven't gotten a chance to watch Oregon. I've seen different things online about Oregon and during the season, and because they played some high profile teams, so I know them from that, but I don't know a lot aside from kind of the highlights of them. But Tennessee and Oregon would be an interesting matchup because, like you said, they're both capable of I'd say capable of greatness, but can they actually do it in a consistent basis? And will the home court advantage help Tennessee enough? To kind of overcome, again, the absence of Jordan Horston. And that brings me to the next point of if the Lady Vols make it to the Sweet 16, we already talked about the chance of, does Jordan Horston come back? Is she able to play if the Lady Vols get to the Sweet 16? And if the Lady Vols do, I thought it was interesting you said you had Nebraska beating Louisville. Let's assume that, let's just assume it's chalk. Let's assume Louisville gets by Nebraska or Gonzaga, whoever they have to play, because I assume they will beat Albany. Let's assume it's Tennessee and Louisville in the Sweet 16. I agree with you that Louisville, to me, is the weakest 1 seed. If, and I know it's kind of a big if still, but if Tennessee gets Jordan Horston back for that game and she's healthy and can play, a good solid 25, 30 minutes in that game and be, pretty much back to normal for the most part, I kind of like. I mean, I know I'm wearing Cora. I know I'm wearing my orange color glasses with this one, but I kind of like Tennessee's chances in that game because, like you said, Louisville has been weak in the second half, and especially in the fourth quarter. And aside from a couple of games this year, especially when injuries were plaguing Tennessee, Lady Vols have, for the most part, third and fourth quarters have been when they've been their best. Again, you can point to the UConn game, you can point to a couple other games on the road this year where that's not been the case, but a lot of times those have been shortly after the Lady Vols suffered, again, a Keon Green injury or Jordan Horston injury, and we're, still, we're kind of shaking and trying to figure things out. But for the most part this year, Lady Vols have had better second halves than first halves. I don't know that I would go be as bold to say, okay, I think Lady Vols go to the Elite Eight if they play Louisville. But I feel like I like their chances better than any other 1 seed or really any other 2 seed that the Lady Vols could face in that matchup. And again, maybe it's Nebraska that Tennessee faces. But I'm curious your thoughts because you and I both, I wasn't sure if you'd say that or not, but so I'm glad you said it too. You and I agree. Louisville is a weak 1 seed, and I think again, especially if Jordan Horston's back, I think Tennessee has a pretty legitimate shot of upsetting them there.
Yeah, I think if they play, I think it matters less about who they play and more about how they play. Because when they play at their best, they can play with anybody. They played with South Carolina for 3 quarters.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a 3-point game at one point in the third quarter. And if they can do that and play to that level and exert that amount of effort and make the correct decisions and execute, they can be a Final Four contender. But they have to do that. That is the problem. They have the talent. The freshmen have like when I went to the SEC tournament, the media got to sit courtside, which was incredible. I wish that they would bring that back at Thompson Bowling because I felt like I saw so much more of the game. I was very close to the players. I could see like their faces. Like I could see like them making decisions. I could see, Brooklyn Miles and Kaiwan bringing up the court and the passes they were seeing. I could see, the way they were defending or, things like that. I was just like, I felt like I saw so much more. And the freshmen really impressed me for the most part in the SEC tournament. So I think that's a good sign because again, it plays into the whole, everyone has a role, playing your role, doing what you need to do for the team to win type situation. Caroline Strickland scored 7 points and had like a handful of rebounds when Tamari Key had to go out. And it's like, that's what they need. That's what they were getting from Kean. That's what they need from her. And I just felt like there's a possibility, like that depth could still be there. And then I think my thought is if they play Nebraska, they might run into another situation like Kentucky because Nebraska scores a lot of points. So if they can't get it under control in the first quarter and Nebraska puts up a lot of points, that's going to like hurt them like at Kentucky. My thought with Louisville is I don't know how that game would go. I think again, I feel like that if they had Jordan Horston back and they're playing Louisville, it would completely depend on how they executed. Like, I think that is what it comes down to, because I was rewatching the third quarter of the Kentucky game today, because I was writing a story about Alexus Dye, and her jumper brought it within 1 point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then Tennessee gets the ball. Jordan Walker misses a layup, which, would have been great to get the lead at that point. But then when they didn't, the decisions they made on offense were really, really poor, in my opinion. I think I wrote down a log of what they did. So after Jordan Walker missed the layup, Howard got and one play. Fine. It's 49-45. That's still 4 points with 6 minutes left in the third quarter. That is not game over. And then Burrell got one touch offensively, like one shot when Kentucky was going on a 10-2 run. And I'm pretty sure by halftime she was 5 of 9 from the field. So that was a head scratcher to me. Why are you not getting Ray Burrell the ball when you're trying to complete that comeback? They're doing like a one pass, and then Alexus Dye, who was hot, took a long jumper, and then Tess got the rebound and then immediately tried to do like a reverse layup that I've never seen her make. And so I was like, why not just keep the possession and reset, And then where was the other one? There's another one where 2 passes, Tess drives, tries to do a left hook over a player when could have just kept passing the ball and gotten a better look. So it was just, when they panicked, they were making not great choices on offense and kind of wasting possessions. And it's like, that's why Kentucky went on a 10-2 run and just shattered the momentum that when you brought it within 1. Mm-hmm. So it's like, in crunch time, those decisions had to be better. And if they do that against Louisville, they have no chance of winning.
Yeah, that's a really good breakdown. I haven't looked at it that granular, but that's a really good breakdown of kind of what happened with the Kentucky game, because it did seem like, you're right, like they got it close. It seems like every time they'd get like a little run, they'd make a mistake or have a turnover, and that would lead to another Kentucky run that would extend the lead back out. I remember that distinctly, of saying, okay, we would get within 4 to 6 to 7 points, and then suddenly Kentucky goes back out to a double-digit lead because there was a turnover or there was a really bad shot selection. And you're right, like that was the killer in that game. It's been the killer in a couple other games too. But also what you said, like the freshmen, for the most part, I agree with you. They were impressive in the SEC tournament, and that does make me wonder about the depth in the tournament moving forward, and will it actually be there and be back, or not back, but at least be to a point where you can make it to the second weekend. And then we'll see what happens. Once you get the second weekend, I mean, you're playing really good teams no matter what, and anything can happen at that point too. Looking kind of broader picture here, I think we can probably talk a little bit more about the Lady Vols, but I know people who listen to this podcast or watch the videos on YouTube, they're big Lady Vol fans, but they also just like women's basketball in general. I know, Cora, you also do a really, really good job of just covering women's athletics in general, and have done a really good job of paying attention to college basketball at large this year. I'm curious about looking at some of the SEC teams. Obviously, South Carolina 1 seed. Kentucky got in because they won the SEC tournament. But I am intrigued by Kentucky, because you'd mentioned earlier about Princeton and you feeling like maybe they should have been seated higher than what they were at 11. But also looking at Kentucky as a team that is healthy and they are shooting really well. I don't know how far. Like I actually look at my rack right now. I had them going until the Sweet 16, and then they get beat by UConn, because I just think UConn just is a better team, especially now that Paige Beckers is back. But I'm curious if your thoughts on some of the SEC teams that are in, because we have Kentucky in there. There's Ole Miss. There's obviously against South Carolina. There is Arkansas is in there. You also have one other team I feel like was in there, Georgia. So you have a pretty good collection of SEC schools in the tournament. So I'm curious your thoughts on, aside from South Carolina is the number 1 overall seed. I think they make it, to me, at least to the Elite Eight, and I'll be interested to see, because I think they'll end up playing Caitlin Clark in Iowa, and I think that's going to be a fun game. So I'll be intrigued to see who moves on from there if it does come down to that matchup. But I am interested to hear your thoughts on an LSU. Sorry, I didn't mention LSU. Interested to hear your thoughts on just kind of the SEC draws, and if anything really sticks out to you about any of the SEC schools besides Tennessee.
Yeah, and I just wanted to also, before I start this, I didn't mean like test Darby should be taking shots.
Oh
I
no,
just
yeah,
meant
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I didn't want it to come off that way. I just think she has higher percentage shots than those, the ones I saw her
Exactly.
take. So make sure you're having the right people taking their shots in those moments. That's all I meant. Anyways,
Mhm.
moving on. Yeah, South Carolina, I have winning it all because if that loss in the SEC tournament championship, I feel like it's going to have like the same effect as that loss at Missouri.
Mhm.
Like everyone should be scared now, basically. Um, they have too much athleticism, depth, size, like everything. Like sometimes they have 2 through 5 are all like over 6'2" on the court. Like no other team can match up with that sometimes. And so they just need to execute down the stretch in the fourth quarter and they'll be fine. So I have South Carolina winning it all. I will say that. And I do want them to, I need them to play Iowa. I need that so badly because I need the stupid National Player of the Year debate to end once and for all. Like I need it to end so badly. So I really would love for that to happen. And then, okay, let me scroll down through my story. I have Ole Miss meeting Baylor, losing to Baylor. I really want that matchup to happen because I would love to see Shakira Austin and Melissa Smith on the same court. I think that would be very entertaining. And Ole Miss they've been impressive to me. I think they could have been higher than a 7 seed. They probably could have been like a 6, in my opinion. But yeah, unfortunate that they have to meet Baylor in the second round because, again, if it was switched and Louisville was 2 seed, I think I would like to see Ole Miss beat Louisville. I think it's possible. But Baylor they brought it out to a really solid team. And I think I have more faith in Melissa Smith to elevate in a crunch time situation and put her team over. Shakira did score 10 points in the fourth quarter against South Carolina, but they were able to kind of shut her down for a lot of the game until then, and it just wasn't enough at the end. I have Tennessee going on the Sweet 16 to Nebraska but if Jordan Horston's back, that's a different game.
Right.
But I just have no idea. I can't really make projections based on if she's going to return by then. I have LSU losing to Ohio State in the round of 32 because I don't know if Alexis Morris is going to be back, and if she is not, I don't really have faith in LSU to make any sort of run because I've seen them. I think the Tennessee game was the first game without her. And the game she went out when she got hurt, they almost lost to Alabama, which, to be fair, Alabama was doing really well at the end of conference play, but they are not the same team without her. Just like Tennessee is, like they still have, I would say Caleb Pointer is more like their Jordan Horston, but Alexis Morris produces a lot on offense for them. Who else? Oh, I have Arkansas beating Utah, upset, but then I have them losing to Texas. That would be a really good game.
Yeah,
I would be excited to see that.
I'm with you on that one. I actually, you mentioned you were big on Ole Miss, and unfortunate that they would run into Baylor in the second round. But I'm with you. Like I know I have Arkansas losing to Texas too, but I actually like Arkansas a lot. They really impressed me both times I've watched them play Tennessee this year, because they play with a lot of effort and a lot of energy out there, and they're actually very talented team. Or I wouldn't say very, but they're a talented enough team to make some noise. I just don't think they'll get by Texas in that second round, though.
No, not with the way Texas is playing right now. I have Texas, I think, going to my Final Four. I actually think I have Texas going to the championship. I'm not gonna lie. I just like Texas a lot right now. I think they're playing really well. Rory Harmon she literally had 50 points, 9 assists, 0 turnovers in the semifinal and final of the Big 12 championship as a freshman against Iowa State and Baylor. So
wow.
And if all their players can contribute offensively along with her, like they could do that. They absolutely can do that. But that's also one of my hottest takes, is having Texas beat Stanford and be the one to get out of that region. So we'll see. Well,
if it makes you feel any better, Cora, I have the same thing. I have Texas and NC State in the Final Four, and a little spoiler here, I have Iowa and Baylor in the Final Four. So I'm with you on Texas. Like I think they will beat Stanford. That's my opinion too.
Yeah, and then Bridgeport. So I did mention I think Princeton's better than 11, but just the way Kentucky's playing right now, I have Kentucky making a run. I'm not gonna lie. Mainly, partly because I think they can do it, a lot because I think they can do it, and partly because I really want them to do it. They were so fun to watch in the SEC tournament. Like, it's funny because I actually tweeted in the first quarter of that championship game that Kentucky was up to something special. Like, they're playing some incredible basketball, and then they won. So I was like, that's the best age tweet I've ever had. But I think, I mean, just the way that they can play was very impressive to me. And they have really solid defense, honestly. There was one possession against LSU. They were playing a really good zone defense, and LSU could not crack it. And Caleb Pointer literally jumped a pass to her own teammate because she wasn't getting the ball and they couldn't like get inside the zone. And I was like, okay, so that's where we're at. And then who else is in here? Oh, I have Georgia getting upset in the first round because I have DePaul winning that play-in game, and I don't really have a lot of confidence in Georgia after watching them at the end of the SEC season. And I really like Anissa Morrow. Like, I have a feeling that she is a player who is already excellent, but will elevate in March. She's gotten her chance, and I don't think she'll waste it.
Well,
I feel like I'm missing somebody. Oh, LSU. Where's LSU in here?
I think you said you have them losing in the second round. Is that right? To
Ohio State? Yeah, to Ohio State. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel you made me feel vindicated, Cora, because I felt like I knew the women's basketball a pretty decent amount this year from watching it a lot this year, just more than I really ever have. And a lot of things you'd said, I was like, okay, yes, I did the same thing. I have Georgia getting upset. I have actually Florida Gulf Coast going to the Sweet 16 and taking on Stanford because just from what I looked at them, I was like, wow, they're actually a really talented team that I don't know how they're a 12 seed. Like that to me is one of the easiest 12-5 upsets I've ever picked in a bracket before. So now watch, it won't happen. But hey, I think it will.
Yeah, the other thing about Florida Gulf Coast is the fact that Kirsten Bell has been back since the end of February. She had a small injury. She's entering the WNBA draft this year. She has a chance to prove herself. And I think when it comes to March, like when you have a player like that who is got something to prove, who can elevate their team as a whole, that's when like special things happen. And so I fully think that, she is someone who can do that.
Well, you kind of teased it already. You mentioned who you have winning it all and a couple of things, but who is your Final Four? And I already mentioned it's Iowa and Baylor and Texas and NC State, but who do you have as your Final Four?
I have South Carolina, Baylor, Texas, and Kentucky.
Wow, that's interesting. I like that. Two SEC teams, and one of them I would not have expected to make it to the Final Four.
Oh yeah, two Big 12 teams too.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah, I have a lot of faith in Kentucky. So if they lose in like the second round, I'll be embarrassed, but it's fine.
But no, I understand where you're coming from. They're playing about as hot as anybody right now, and they've won 8 or 9 straight games. I've forgotten how many they've won now. Yeah, so like they're healthy. Like they always had the potential to be this. They had so many issues earlier in the year with health and different stuff. They kept hitting road bumps and road bump after road bump, and then they finally have. It's kind of like the reverse of the Lady Vols. Well, kind of. Lady Vols had injury, early on, obviously too, with Ray and Marta Suarez going down before the year even began. But it's almost like the exact opposite of the Lady Vols, where Lady Vols had that one big hurdle, or I guess technically 2, to get over, and once they did, they got healthy again. And then they started kind of falling apart with Kean Green getting hurt and then Jordan Horston getting hurt. Reverse happened with Kentucky, where they had injuries and stuff early on, and then they finally got healthy, and now they're making a run. So I don't think you're crazy at all for picking that, but you're right. Like I say all these things and talk with all these different people about different things like this. I'm like, I feel pretty good about this, and then they go and lose in the first round. I'm like, okay, well now I feel like I'm an idiot. So
yeah. I mean, it is March Madness. No one really knows exactly what they're talking about. The other thing about Kentucky is I heard people saying that like, oh, Kyra Elsie, like she's gonna lose her job or something, and I was like, no, she's not. Like, she's a good coach. They had 7 players for a few games. Like, I'm like, she's a really good coach. She was cut from the same cloth as Kelly. She's a good coach. I watched her a lot during that South Carolina game, and I really like the way she coaches. Like, she's very like you could tell she's telling them what they need to hear, but then it's immediately like, you're good. Let's move on. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. And it's like she knows her players so well and she has such a good relationship with them. And I loved how she talked about, I had asked her something about seeing Ryan like end her career on a strong note. And she said, we had a conversation halfway through the season because she started the season under so much pressure. She's been the number 1 draft pick of this class for 2 years. All-American, freshman of the year, like all these things, and people expected a lot out of them this year. So she started the year under a lot of pressure, and she's like, I could see the stress in the way she was playing. And so I just wanted to free her of that. I wanted her to have fun. I wanted her to enjoy her last season because you can't get this back. And, she wanted her to know that no matter what she does, that her legacy at Kentucky was so good already. Like there was a legacy there. She didn't have to do anything else. And then she started having fun. The whole team had a meeting after that losing skid, and they're a different team now. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a lot to be said about that too, about having your best player, your leader, have fun again and enjoy what they're doing and be able to elevate the team like that.
Well, Cora, this has been fantastic. I love your passion for sharing stories, and I can tell just from what you're telling like there, like you love kind of digging the deeper and getting these stories. And I think you're, obviously in the right field and doing the right thing you should be doing, because I think you're doing a good job of sharing these stories. You've done it with the Lady Vols all throughout the season and everything too. So before we end here, I want you to be able to plug your work and plug where Lady Vol fans or just fans of women's basketball or women's athletics can find your work and follow you, because I know most people on listening to the podcast probably already know who you are and everything, but on the off chance they don't or they're new here, let them know where they can find your work and then some stuff you want to plug that you've had come out here in the last couple of days or last week.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It's been really fun to come on your podcast because I do not have the bandwidth right now to do my own. So it's been fun to talk about things as opposed just to writing. I have a bunch of stuff from Selection Sunday, and then like obviously my whole bracket prediction out. I've been really bad about tweeting stuff, so I haven't tweeted like any of it. But it's on Knox News. I'll probably tweet some stuff leading up to this weekend. And then I had just like today submitted a pretty big feature on Alexus Dye, which was so fun to write. I wish I could have written it like 3,000 words long, but like no one's going to read that. So we kept it a little bit shorter, but obviously everyone, all the Lady Vols fans know there's something about Alexus Dye in March. You saw her almost help upset Texas A&M last year. You saw her in the SEC tournament this year. I think it was 42 points, 24 rebounds in 2 games, wow. Something like that. And she's such a fun like person to get to know. And, talking to her former coaches, like everyone really, it just loves her. And she is just so special. And I'm so glad I got to tell her story because I wanted to since she's been here, but it's hard when you only have one season and you're trying to find the right timing. And so I'm glad it happened like this because she is definitely a player for March. And so she's also one of those players who can elevate a team. She's a huge spark for Tennessee. So it's nice for them to have both her and Ray be able to spark that offense and be able to get them going. But that should run online, I think, tomorrow night, maybe Friday morning. And I will definitely be tweeting that one. So keep an eye out.
Well, Cora, thank you so much. And again, Lady Vol fans or just fans in general, go follow her. Again, I'll plug her Twitter in the description here, but I'm also going to read it out once my Twitter decides it wants to load. You're just Cora Hall with 3 L's, right? If I remember correctly. Yeah, so at Cora Hall with 3 L's at the end there, and you can find her on Twitter there. And again, writer for Knox News, and she does a great job just covering women's athletics in general and just talking about different stuff on there. And yeah, you mentioned the podcasting. I'm glad you've been able to come on here. You've been a great asset to have, a great asset to me, a guest for me on here, and just great to follow along this year. So I know you've gotten a lot of love from Lady Vol fans too throughout the year. So I know they're very appreciative of you too. But thank you all so much for tuning in and watching/listening to this episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back again, hopefully next week, to talk about, hopefully, 2 wins for Lady Vols. And I'll have either Cora or Maria or somebody, or maybe do a couple episodes and have a bunch of people on. I don't know. We'll do a bunch of different things, hopefully next week for hopefully a successful week for Tennessee, men's and women's, actually, both in the NCAA tournament. Again, subscribe to the channel on YouTube if you haven't. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't. Really appreciate all of you for the support. Signing off for Cora, I am Nathaniel, and this has been another episode of the Lady Vol Basketball Fever Podcast.